Thank you so much, Pankaj sir, for joining us on a podcast at Dawdle. Extremely grateful that you took out time out of your busy schedule to share your insights and experiences with our ever increasing global audience. Dawdle.live is now 125,000 plus CXOs and senior leaders from across the globe who share their experiences and knowledge with the community and thereby helping them grow professionally as well as personally. I welcome you, sir, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rishi.
We have got a very interesting set of topics for you to discuss, sir. But before we go, I know that you don't need an introduction, but still, if you could take us through your journey so far to give a good context to our audience.
Sure, Rishi. As many the people in my generation who did engineering and then felt that maybe they should do an MBA, so I did the same. In my case, I joined a consulting firm, then worked in the banking industry, and then came into the world of offshore industry, and now working at the Indian conglomerate. I think the theme that I now pick up in hindsight is that my initial job of consulting gave me a broad view about strategy and business and what's going on in the economy and various sectors and so on. The banking financial services industry gave me an exposure to the commercial aspects of business. So while you're doing strategy, sometimes you're not so focused on the numbers. So I think those experiences in banking provided me to think about things in the form of numbers also. So from strategy to appreciating a business from a number standpoint. And I think this whole offshoring world and the data analytics world provided me an insight into what are the newer tools and technologies can make those strategies work, can make those numbers happen. So the way I reflect, I say that I learned strategy, I learned the economics, and now I understand how some of these tools and technologies can be applied to, get that strategy going and get those numbers coming.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a short and sweet and impactful introduction. Sir, the first thing that we have on which we need your insights on is that you have led data and analytics transformation across four major organizations. When you look back, how have you seen the role of data evolve from being a support function to becoming a strategic business enabler?
Yeah, I think I'll briefly touch upon what I learned in those experiences and then try to generalize and say what are the trends. Because, what you do is what is most relevant in that context that you are. At that point in time, you're not thinking about the big picture of the industry and all. You're just responding to the need of the organization. So I would say my first exposure to data happened in Dell, where it was a technology company, very data driven. So I think the culture was reasonably data driven. And actually, I should start from GE actually before that. GE, where I was a Six Sigma person, and Six Sigma also was a data driven thing where you utilized principles of continuous improvement. We used to have a framework called DMAKE, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. So some amount of, data and analytics used to happen there. So GE was also very process driven, data driven, all of that. And then came Dell, where I was expected to set up a data team. So while in the GE role, Six Sigma, I did have as a black belt, drove data analytics, but I didn't drive a team. But in Dell, I was expected to set up a team. So G's requirement was to drive process improvement. So data played a role in process improvement through the DMAKE framework. Dell's need was that how do you help my business leaders take decision based on data? So there I ended up setting teams which were aligned to various business functions or businesses to help them. So it was in the area of supply chain, marketing, online, financial services, pricing, what have you. So the role over there was more of embedding those teams into the business to help them take better decisions using data. So slightly different from G, where you were improving processes. Here you were again improving process, but using database decision making in a much more deeper way. So it's somewhat of, I would say, an evolution. In fact, I used to tell people that this is also DMAKE, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. But the A has become more complex and more appropriate. So you're still improving process, but analytics is playing a much bigger role in how you take better decision to still improve the process, whether it's a supply chain process, marketing process, or pricing process. The next one was actually in Wells Fargo, where I ended up getting some exposure to digital product management, which is the agile way of working, setting up products, and so on and so forth. There, I would say more than data, the experience that I gathered was how do you be agile? How do you respond quickly and, things like that? Because in the world of product management, the old methodology of waterfall was being replaced by the methodology of agile. So to me, while the G and the Dell experience were related to process and data, this one was more related to culture of putting in the agile team with product owners, scrum masters, and all of that. How do you drive the culture of the weekly sprints, bi-weekly sprints, retrospective, so on and so forth. So I think it is more of the way of working on how do you drive an agile team is what I picked up. And therefore, when I came to the Aditya Birla Group, I mean, in my mind, I share with people that I was lucky to have driven a bunch of different things, and they all come together here because there are process to be improved, there is data to be analyzed, there are data products that can be driven using the agile methodology. So to me, it's a culmination of all the lessons that were learned in the previous three companies coming together, because it's a large conglomerate, requires different strokes for different companies. So I think all of them is getting applied over here.
Thank you so much, sir. And when we talk about enterprise scale, data complexity also grows exponentially. So, what are those first principles, sir, that you apply when building or modernizing an enterprise data ecosystem, particularly when you are talking about multiple business verticals?
Right. So first of all, I mean, the context over here is that there are lots of different public listed companies which have to do their own business in their own way. Our team is more like you can think of it as a internal think tank or a corporate function. Essentially, you can think of us more as a coach who's helping them develop their own muscle so that they can run faster. So we are not like a shared service or a service provider, but really someone who can do things which they on their own may not do. So that's the construct in which we are. So unlike Dell, where it was a shared service, you kind of took up the job and you ran it for them. This is not that. Here you are hoping that they will do their own thing. And therefore, to your point, each of them has their own data environment. Each of them have their own technology environment because they're all very independent, different businesses governed by their independent board and so on and so forth. So what we tend to do is we don't try to sort of do everything in a central place. Sometimes we do something centrally and then DOT it to them. But in general, in most places, wherever possible, we try to do things in their own environment, help them develop their own data lake, do the modeling in their own environment, so on and so forth. At the same time, when things are done, we try to, you can say, in some ways, keep a copy of that, which can then be utilized in other places as well. So we as a team try to bring one innovation, something that are innovative in nature, which the business on their own will not do, and reusability. That if you have done it in one place, you can apply it across the group. So to us, the two mantras really which drive our team is innovation and reusability, because these are the two things that individual teams can't do, and which is what a central team should do. And this is what any central team in any function should do. I mean, we are a data team, but we have other central functions for marketing, IT, or sustainability, whatever. So I think the general belief is that the central team should be focusing on innovation and reusability, because those are the two things which don't happen automatically on their own. And the central teams are best placed to do it because they are the COEs. They understand these things better and they should be doing it. And that's how we have positioned ourselves and that's how we operate.
But doesn't that, kind of delay the insights, sir, if everything is being centralized, especially in terms of.
So that's where I was telling that we don't centralize it. We do it in their own environment and then keep a copy which can then be utilized. So essentially, we are creating reusable components which can be then leveraged by all others as well. So today, for example, let's say I'm doing something in a company called Ultratech Cement on logistics. Now I've developed something for logistics. That same logistics model can be sort of taken away and probably applied to Hindalco or Grasim or someone else. If I have done something in marketing in a company called, let's say, Aditya Birla Fashion, I could pick up some of those best practices and apply them to jewelry. So the idea is to do something interesting, innovative in one business, and then sort of distill it and take that knowledge somewhere else so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel and they can do it in their own way. And of course, later on, what we think, at least on the consumer space, we can do a lot more cross-selling and loyalty building and all of that. But today our focus is a lot more on just helping them become better at what they are doing. And once some critical mass is achieved, then we can do some more commonality and common platforms and so on. Right now, the common platform type thing that we are focusing on is in the area of external data. Because today what has happened is, unlike the past, a lot of external data is available. A lot of it is actually public data also. The government is making the data available. Some of it is private data that individual companies are buying. So what we again as a central team are trying to do is that, why does every company have to go look for that external data source or that paid data source? Can we as a central team bring it in one place, and you as a user can then just go and take it as you go, versus everyone trying to do their own thing? So wherever there's an opportunity that a central team can bring value by consolidating something, we do that. But in general, our belief is far more in each of them being agile and not hinder their agility to act fast. Because to your point, the more you centralize, it slows you down. So we want to centralize, keeping a, what should I say, an IP which can be reused, but the day-to-day run the business is not centralized. Everyone is free to do their own thing. That's how we have orchestrated our business model.
Right, sir. And with this, what happens is that the best practices can be easily, kind of
Yeah.
transferred, from one
Yeah.
department to the other. As As the domain of analytics matures, enterprises are moving beyond descriptive dashboards to predictive and prescriptive intelligence. What are those frameworks or approaches do you use to help organizations shift from insight generation to decision automation and foresight?
Yeah. So I think what at least we have learned is that there's a certain flow in any business at any point in time. And the question is, can you accelerate their flow? So the business is moving in a certain direction. And we believe that some of these things should accelerate that. They should act as a catalyst. In fact, many a times I am asked that, what does AI do? Or what does data do? Or what does your team do? Or what do you do? Right. And you have to explain it in a very, very simple terms. So the way I respond, and all of our team members respond, is to say, essentially data is there to help take better decisions, right, and faster. So in some ways we are saying we are making it faster and better, your decision making, which you are bringing a lot of data, you are taking 4 hours to get something and another 3 hours to get insights. Now you can get it quickly in the morning, let's say, right? So faster and better decisions is one sort of value add, which allows you to do better in your business or whatever it is. That is one part of it, which is in the efficiency side of it. I think the second part is something totally new, which was not possible. That is where I think the transformational activity comes on board. So many a time people look at data and AI as a transformational activity, and I say that actually it's a whole continuum. You can do some simple stuff, which is faster, better decision, then do some incremental, and then also that. And now again, depends on the business. So let's say we have launched a new business. Let's say we have launched the jewelry business. So initially, you're opening stores, you are doing some merchandising, you are selling. So initially, what you just want to know is some basics. How are these stores doing? What is selling? When? Where should the next store be? Right. So you can help people take some of those decisions. Let's say over a period of a year or so, some of those weekly, daily dashboards, now you've collected good data. Now you can look at some more predictive models and say what can happen. To me, I think the business at this point in time probably just needs some simple stuff to do something daily, do something tomorrow, do something next week, and you help them with that. And you don't say that, oh, this is very simple stuff, this is just BI and we won't do it. So earlier, many people said, oh, BI is very, very low end, we will not do, we'll only do AI. But I think what we have learned is eventually it's a business which has a need. Sometimes the business initially may need just simple BI, but that BI layer will allow them to become friendly with database decision making and also allow them to collect good data. And then AI can take over. So I think some places, we are seeing the journey from BI to AI, if I can say so, because BI is the basics of doing something on a daily basis. And when you have accumulated data for a long period of time and rich data, then you can apply AI and do far more sophisticated things. So I think they are not two different things. Depending on the stage the business is in, you can do whatever it takes to accelerate their decision making process and move the business forward.
Sir, one question that's coming to my mind is that people usually tell that, bigger organizations have got legacy systems in place and it becomes very difficult to centralize all the data or to create data lakes so that AI, things can be implemented faster. Your views on that, sir, since you have worked across, four very big organizations.
Yeah. So I think clearly when the systems or the software were getting bought and implemented in those businesses, the purpose at that time was to automate something, make something simple. I don't think at that point in time people were imagining that people will use this data to take businesses. So clearly those things were not made for current age. So I think what we tend to do is that, you said that, we try to create a centralized data lake. So we go in, we look at and usually there'll be lots of systems. Now, some of the system will be totally not having the right data. So we'll also have a roadmap to say that today some of these systems have good data. These are the data that will flow into the data lake. This can allow only these decisions, and that's all we'll do. While we fix some of this, and maybe 6 months down the line, these other set of decisions can also be taken because now that data has become big. In fact, in some cases, because we also worked with machines, some of the sensors don't exist, so they are faulty. They say, okay, we'll install the sensor, we'll collect the data, and 6 months later that data can also come into the data lake. So in some ways there is a phased approach to, so we kind of do a diagnostics to say what is the kind of data that exists, what is the data quality, and depending on what is correct, those decisions can be taken. And as more and more data becomes good, then other decisions can be taken. So there's a decision making sort of roadmap, you can say, depending on the availability of the good quality data.
Sir, I've seen that, you often emphasize that data should empower and should not replace human judgment. So, how do you ensure that decision making remains human centered even as AI models and machine learning systems become more autonomous?
Right. I think what is happening these days, Rishi, and I think a lot of people are now starting to also talk about it more, is in which we had started to see earlier, was that decision making is not just about choosing the right solution. I think it's also about choosing the right problem, which is worth solving. And I think that is the area where the humans probably are still very much required, because that goes into the realm of strategy. That in some senses, as a business, you are choosing to do something or go after a certain problem and not something else. Who takes that call? And I think that's where I think the human beings who have a far more better understanding the context and a belief about the future, right? So I think, I mean, take any business. You can take a call that I will choose this strategy versus this. Each of those two strategies might be right for them depending on what they want to do, and they will solve those solutions in that. So taking a call on what path to choose is a big decision, and that I think humans will have to take. So many a times, while humans can take decision based on choosing the right solution, choosing the right problem is certainly an area which goes in the realm of strategy, which humans have to and should take. And therefore I think we need to build that capacity and capability among people who may or may not have develop that muscle, so to say. So I think that muscle has to be developed by all, because everyone has to go ahead of whatever we're doing and start playing at the next level of abstraction.
This is very insightful, sir. People usually focus on the solution, but what is the right problem to solve is very critical. So when you were at Wells Fargo, you championed transformation through three E's, which is effectiveness, efficiency, and experience. Can you share how analytics and AI are now being used not just to optimize cost, but to enhance stakeholder experience, both customer as well as employee?
Right. So, if I mean, that three was really a very generic framework which can be applied to any business, any function, anything. Because what tends to happen is we focus on one and miss out on something else in anything. So, our thinking with that three was that there are these three sort of uh, things to be optimized, and they may be contradicting each other. So for example, think of hotel industry. You can give some at a very high end hotel, you can give a very high level of experience where the whole efficiency, effectiveness, and that part may not be so critical, but you want to say experience is high, I'm happy to spend more money, I'm happy to have this process slightly more costly, and so on and so forth, right? So I think again that is derived from the business strategy that you have, where you are optimizing all the three. So the idea there was that there is no one size fits all. Whatever you are trying to do, look at all of these three and try to find the right optimal. Because many a times what tends to happen is people will just go after efficiency, forget the experience. Or sometimes there is efficiency but no effectiveness. So I think the idea there was to just bring forth the idea that it's a multi-dimensional, multi-variable problem, whatever you're trying to solve, and don't try to solve it in two dimensions, because we tend to just do two dimensions, saying, okay, I'll do this and that will happen. And the idea there was to help people think it in a more broader sense. So that was the intent of that framework there.
It has to be multi-dimensional. It should not be y is equals to fx kind of a thing, like.
Yeah. Because I remember even in the HR team, the hiring team, even they were applying this process. And then the question was that while you can drive very high efficiency and low cost of acquisition of talent, but if the hiring process is not giving the candidates a good experience, then are you not eroding your employer branding in the market? So where are you counting the experience part of it, right? Because HR would be given a budget, you have to hire so much, the cost per hire is this, so you can drive a high amount of efficiency, but you may compromise on experience. And there was no easy measure of experience over there. So there, the team then started to put some other mechanisms to, uh, you know, judge how the employee experience was, even for those people who didn't get hired. Because many a time, people who don't get hired tend to have bad experience, and they take the reputation of the company in a negative way outside. So that's how we define in the HR hiring process. So I'm just saying that that framework allowed every process in the organization, not just the core banking process, but any other process that people are going after, to say, are you looking at it holistically? Are you compromising on something just because it is not being measured or something like that?
Got it. And when we talk about Aditya Birla Group, sir, you have been driving analytics across diverse sectors, from metals and manufacturing to finance and fashion. What are those unique challenges of embedding AI and data driven thinking in a traditional asset heavy industries as compared to digital first ones?
Right. So clearly, what happens is if you look at just the nature of any consumer business versus, let's say, a manufacturing or even a enterprise business, I think the enterprise or the manufacturing business, the changes are not very fast, right? You have set up a factory, the factory is producing well, but in consumer businesses, things are happening on a daily, hourly basis, right? So the decision making requirement is far more heavy over here, and not as heavy at a macro level. Of course there'll be things that are at a macro level. So you have to also recognize that the nature of the business is different, and you can't apply the same approach. So many a time we have had people come from, let's say, retail businesses, and if they are asked to work on the manufacturing side, they say, "Hey, this is very slow." because they're so used to taking decisions on an hourly, daily basis in their retail business where there was a website or there was a store and all of that. So the question was, for that process, you have to take many decisions very quickly. So you have to tune yourself this way. Here, maybe there are a few critical decisions that don't have to be taken very quickly, will take a while, but that's how you have to tune yourself. So I think in some ways, I just use my running analogy to say, if you're running a 100-meter or a marathon, you have to have a different mindset, a different rhythm, and different set of muscles, and both are races, but they have a different character. So every business has a character. No one is right or the other. For that, so you need to know what game to play, and therefore what muscles to exercise and what expectations to have. Many a times, if you're a data analytics professional, you may ignore this context and try to apply the same approach and the same culture that you had in one business to another. So I think the idea is to appreciate the business context, the rhythm, and the approach, and then apply your skill to make that rhythm better than what it was, versus expecting that rhythm to be something else that you had in another place.
This is insightful, sir. And as the data volumes and AI adoption grow, there will be concerns around privacy, bias, and ethics. So, how should large enterprises build trust and governance framework that ensure responsible and transparent use of AI?
So I think if at least on the consumer space, this area is being taken up very seriously even by the regulators. And we have had GDPR rules in Europe and US, and over here also DPDP has come on board. So I think even the compliance and the regulation is forcing everyone to think about in a good way. So in our kind of context, the way we work is a lot of work actually today happens still in the factories, and there are machines. So over there, some of these problems are not as this thing. These are more problem in the consumer facing stage. Still, a lot of work that we do is in the back end in the factory area. So it's not such a big deal at this point in time. But clearly, in some businesses which are customer facing, all of that, it is still there. And there are good framework, there are good vendors, there are good approaches that have to be applied there. So I don't think it's such a big issue. Like I said, right now in our group, at least in the way that our teams are, we are still solving a lot of complex machine-oriented problems. In those areas, at least, these things are not as critical. And in fact, here the problem is that how do you get the data out from the OEMs? Because a lot of these machines are supplied by OEMs, and many of the contracts don't allow us to access the data even from the OEMs. Forget something else. So we have different set of challenges.
So, this is a very important point. So, how to get data from the OEMs? Because if that
I think what had happened was traditionally when these things were bought or whatever was procured, people didn't focus on accessing data from there. So the contracts either were silent, or in some places it was said that, oh, if you want some analysis, we'll do it for you for a fee and things like that. And that point in time, people didn't do too much. And if they did once or twice, it was okay. So we've had to renegotiate and rewrite those contracts where we are saying that this is our data in your machine, and we should be paying you to access our own data and so on and so forth. And these days, many of the tech vendors have also created some kind of, see, everyone is now also realizing that data is very, very valuable. In some cases, we have contracts with the SAP and others also, where it is hard to extract data out of them without paying them money and all that. So I think in all of these places, you have to then relook at the vendor relationship, relook at some of the contracts, and work towards making some of that data available so that you can do your own analysis and not rely on the vendor who supplied you that machine. Because a lot of data analytics now has to be connected with many other data sources. So you can't say that, if you don't get data from one system, how will you combine it with the 5 other systems? And you can't bring data from 6 other systems into the same software and do the analysis there. So I think those types of things are new opportunities which didn't exist. So some of those contracts and thought processes didn't exist. I think they are changing.
So, when we talk about technology, that's only one side of transformation. Culture is the other side. What are those cultural and behavioral shifts you believe are most essential for an organization to truly become data fluent?
Right. So actually, to some extent, inspired by my stay in GE when I was a significant person, and GE was a large conglomerate. Those days, there was an industry-wide framework for process improvement called DMAIC, and I spoke about it. So it's called Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control. And it was said that wherever there's a process, these are the 5 steps that have to be followed. So it was a common language across the corporate with many different businesses. So we asked the same question to ourselves last year, because our team has been working across group businesses which are very diverse, to say what is that common language or the common framework that we can apply to all businesses which have a common theme. And we relied on our own experiences of working within the group companies to come up with that framework. So just to give you a story, so we'll do a project, use the data, and kind of create a model. Then we'll BOT it to them. Then someone say, oh, how much do you have to pay for it? What's the cost? By the way, what is the ROI? Then how are the people trained? Do we have trained people or not? Oh, you also have a vendor or a startup. How do you make these partnerships work? Oh, by the way, is this project really strategic or could we have done something else, right? So all these kinds of stories happen. So we tried to reflect and then created a framework which we now use internally as we talk to each other, because culture is a very fuzzy word. We tried to
Yes.
demystify culture through this framework. So what we now have three layers and we call it ways of thinking, ways of working, and ways of doing. So thinking, working, doing, really the why, how, and the what. So why and how are really the culture element, and what is the technology element. So technology for us is data science, data engineering, data architecture. That's the easy part. Three boxes in the bottom, these three technical artifacts. The two layers on the top, the middle layer, the operating model, which is the sustaining layer, really has talent, funding, ecosystem and partnership, and adoption and scaling. So if you think about it, one part of the culture is, do you have the right people to all that? Then do you have the funding and all available? Do you have the ecosystem partnership? You shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. And then you have a way to scale it because you have created it modular. So that's the four box in the middle, which we call the ways of working. The ways of thinking is what we call is strategy and governance, and then research and innovation, and then AI maturity. So strategy and governance is to say that what is the business strategy? Where is the business growing? Have some of these projects been derived from that? Or have you just picked up because you found there's something lacking? So strategy and governance is then saying, are you then governing it? And you just don't pick up a project and leave it. So that's the first part. Research and innovation is, have you done adequate research to figure out what are the best practices, what could solve it, what are the alternate approaches, and found the solution which is really unique and innovative. And then AI maturity is all about measuring all of these other things to say, are you becoming better at talent or funding or partnership or data science or data engineering or strategy? So there are these 10 boxes, three on the top, four in the middle, and three at the bottom. One of them is the measurement box, the AI maturity, which is measuring all the other nine boxes in a self-assessment mode to say, how am I doing? Next year, have I become better? So that's how we are saying this is a common language. You could be retail, you could be renewable energy, you could be aluminum. You can apply this method to yourself to say, how well are you doing on these sort of 10 muscles? And in a sense, saying that you have to become a what I call the full stack human being. So I call the ways of thinking as humanities. I call the ways of working as commerce, and this as science. And I say you have to become a full stack human being because only humanities will help you ask the right question. Technology will solve that question for you, and commerce is the oil which will make sure that you sustain forever and don't. So that's the way we are kind of projecting this framework to say that we have to look at this whole thing. The top two cultural elements are very critical because if you don't get the why and how right, this what in itself will not sustain.
This is so nicely explained, sir. As you know, you see automation and AI are reshaping the roles. What are those skills that will define the next generation of data professionals? Do you see a future where every employee, not just analyst, become
Right. So like I've been talking about it, I'm calling our analysts also to say you guys have to become full stack human beings. So you chose science because that was the most rewarding career in the past, and you ignored humanities and commerce. But today now you need all three. Because if you have to go solve a business problem, what to solve, the original question that you asked, Rishi, is really in the world of humanity. There's no right answer. You and I can, in the same industry, can choose to define the way we want to attack the problem in way, choose different problems to solve, and we both can be right and we both can be successful. So that's the first part of the why of it. And then the commercial aspect of it, that are we really appreciating, is this making sense, is this making money, is it ROI there? And then technology also. So I think these three coming together is what will make someone successful. In the past, the world was not so rapidly changing, so you could just be good in one and hopefully the other things came from someone else and you can together but in today's agile world, if some one person has all three, they are able to better sort of make the product or move forward than bringing three different people together and merging them.
So I was talking to one of the senior leaders. He was also telling that the role of CTO is kind of fading away. You know, people need a person who knows product, tech, as well as the business side, all the three things. So the same thing is there in, in this case as well, I think.
Yeah, I think everyone is realizing that the way we had constructed our organization, the roles and responsibilities and all that was probably relevant in the previous era. In today's new era, we have to relook at some of those things. And even if we don't look at it, the individuals will do that. So I think at least I've been seeing in these digital product teams 5 6 years ago when I was setting up these teams, we had a lot of well-defined roles. There were product owner, there were scrum masters, there were agile coaches, there were developers, testers, and all of that. I think over time, slowly, I started to find as the agile methodology matured, the number of agile coaches start to dwindle. They said, oh, we don't need coaches now. This culture is established and we can do it. So the agile coaches became less. Then the scrum master role, people saying, hey, this agile process is well understood. You don't really need a scrum master. Even the product owner can play that role. Right. So over time, different people in that team are picking up adjacent roles and able to play dual role, and therefore you probably don't need that individual having that single skill. So I think that is bound to happen, that people start to become all rounders, people want to grow, and if you have enough all rounders, maybe the one specialist, unless they are really really good, you may not need many of them. So I think those types of things have happened in the past. They're happening at a much more faster rate with these new technologies today.
And at the end of the podcast, sir, we'd like to understand from you, if you have to imagine the enterprise of 2030 powered by AI, data, and augmented intelligence, what would be its defining characteristics be, and what will separate the leaders from the laggards in this transformation?
Right. So over here, I don't know whether I should say a contrarian view or something, but today, if you look at a lot of innovation and everything that is happening in this field is happening by the big tech companies. It's happening in the West, and a lot of people are saying, "Hey, we don't even need these freshers; they'll be replaced by agents and this, that, and the other." Right? So a lot of people are saying, "Okay, do we really need freshers? We'll only need seasoned people and experienced people and so on and so forth." First of all, one can always argue that how will you get an experienced people later if you don't have freshers? But
Yes.
besides the point, I think the West has an aging demographic. So they can afford to have less sort of freshers, so to say, and more seasoned people. So in alignment to the demographic of, let's say, Japan or Korea or Europe or many places where there are far fewer younger people and far more older people, maybe they can afford to have an org chart or an employment situation where you are not hiring hundreds and thousands of freshers, because you have designed your organization and designed your processes to take care of through the seasoned people. We in India, and maybe also folks in Africa or wherever the demographic is different, I think we have to reimagine and rethink of our own org design and how do we want to utilize AI. I think we have the advantage of these young people coming in who can bring a lot of energy, a lot of new ideas, and change the way things happen. So I think our competitive advantage is in the youth that we have, the demographic dividend that we talk about, and how we can train all of them to utilize these technologies and do far more number of experiments. Because to me, in today's day and age, one of the big metric for success would be how many experiments can you do. The people who can do more experiment fast, they will learn more and they will go ahead. So I think that we have tremendous energy of the youth, and we have to define and design our systems and utilizing of AI in a different way than maybe the Western people will do, because it may be relevant for them. I mean, I don't know whether one should find that correlation or not, but recently there was an announcement by Geo that they are, I think, offering Gemini or something bundled with their phone, but it was made available only to 18 to 25-year-old. So in one of my WhatsApp groups of my college, and as you can imagine, we are not in that age group, people are complaining that, oh, why are we being discriminated against and why are they giving it only to the youngsters? And my response was this: maybe they believe that some of us will be difficult to change our behavior and we may not use these new technologies in new ways, but you give it to these youngsters, they will find many new ways to utilize it, and maybe that's where the new innovation will happen, and maybe we'll be the ones who will follow that. So let them innovate and then we'll be the followers. So I don't know that is true or not, but to my point, I think we have to look at our own demographic, our own economy, our own country, what we need, and utilize AI within the context of our own people. And it will be probably different from what the other countries may need, because their demographics is aging. They will use it differently, and that's good for them. We have to find our own approaches.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Really an insightful session. And again, we are extremely grateful at Dawdle that you took out time to share your experiences with our audience. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Rishi. Great to have you here. Bye.